Limited to Limitless Transformational Coaching presents Limitless Conversations. Insights to Transformational Breakthroughs.
Giving Recklessly with Leslie Nelson.
Welcome to Limitless Conversations, Insights into Transformational Breakthroughs. I'm Lisa Murphy, your hostess, and today we are speaking with Leslie Nelson. Leslie Nelson is the founder and CEO of Pivotal Connections, LLC, and the author of Giving Recklessly, Testimonies and Examples to Inspire Higher Levels of Generosity. She spent 40 years across federal government, the military as a spouse, and a nonprofit serving people with significant disabilities before fully retiring in 2023 to build her own company. She's passionate about parents, especially moms, and young people, teaching leadership, communication, and the kind of self-knowledge that holds steady through conflict and confusion. In 1991, she was diagnosed with lupus, a transformation she's carried in to how she lives today and how she leads. Leslie, thank you for your service, your sacrifice, and welcome to Limitless Conversations.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you so much for inviting me to the show. I am so looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. So when we talked before, you told me you think about your life in service and talking about 40 years in federal government, military, and the nonprofit scene before finally retiring in 2023 to build this. Walk me back to that restlessness you felt creeping up. When did you first know a new season was starting for you?
Lisa, I've actually experienced multiple times when I felt that there was a new season coming because of being a military spouse. And although my husband's been out of service for a number of years, because of being a military spouse, I often remember getting that itch, like an itch every few years. It seems like when it was time for us to transition to another location, I usually get that sense. But it would really got more compelling, if you will, in the mid 2015, 2016, transition to another area. And I began caring for my father during his illness, and I just felt kind of the seeds of restlessness begin then. I knew there was more that I wanted to do. And so actually 2 years before I eventually fully retired or officially retired, I began forming my nonprofit agency. My organization then. I have nonprofit agency in my mind because that's something I want to look into also in the future. They've been a great support for me with what I do. But again, I started feeling that way probably 2 years before I actually retired. And that was the time that I began, doing things like vision boards, just looking into getting my company registered, all those things that led up to me ultimately jumping into it in 2023.
I love that you do vision boards, and I want to take a little sidestep into that for just a moment. How did utilizing vision boards to clarify your path or your purpose help you in that process?
I have a good friend and she has a LLC also. We are both Maxwell Leadership Certified team members. And I spoke to her around that time, 2020, 2021, and that's one of the things that she specializes in. When I look at my vision board, we're talking 5 years later, I absolutely love seeing the things written down that I said I wanted to do, the people I wanted to meet, the organizations I wanted to serve. And Lisa, it's just beautiful looking at this board. I did another iteration after that, but just looking at the board and realizing that I was true to my passion. I was true to my values. I was true to the things I want to do. There's still a lot of work to do, but vision boards are just great for capturing things, getting those things in writing, because we know once we write things down, we're more likely to walk them out. So I do recommend vision boards to anyone that's aspiring a major life change, whether it's retirement or another transition. They're beautiful tools.
I always say they bring dreams into possibilities.
Yes.
So
yes.
I think that's amazing.
Yes.
You were a military spouse, and most of us understand that military spouses you have to move every 3 or 4 years, right? You're
Yes.
always having to rebuild the family stability before you could even think about your own job. What
Mhm.
did that constant cycle of starting over and stabilizing things for others teach you about leadership that you wouldn't have learned any other way?
You hit the nail on the head, and because oftentimes the things that we directly experience have the greatest impact. And in the moment, it was difficult. Every 3 or 4 years, I always worked full time once we got settled. So every 3 or 4 years, it was packing up with my husband, moving the kids to another place, and then making sure everyone got settled in. They had to go to school. My husband got back to work. Oftentimes, because I was in the federal government, connected with the federal government, I would have a job that I could move into quickly, but it was always the setting up the house and getting everybody ready. I remember times feeling as if I couldn't get enough for myself. It was that sacrifice that I was willing to make. And even today, I encourage military spouses who are going through that right now as we think about our separations and deployments. It is difficult in the moment, but I also had goals, I had aspirations, and so I had to lead myself well and realize that these were just moments, these were just seasons. And I can't say that I had it perfect because it was far from being perfect. The highlights, though, were every time we moved, we earned friendships or gained friendships with different people. And to this day, we've got friendships with people that go many, many years back. And the beauty of seeing those friendships flourish, seeing our kids flourish in those different spaces. Today, each of them have no problems traveling to wherever they want to travel because they were so used to doing that. So leading myself well involved staying true to my goals, to my aspirations, but yet being willing to sacrifice in the moment because it was a necessary sacrifice. And at the end of the day, want to see my family excel, and for my husband to have a successful career. And I do talk about that more in my book as we talk about generosity because it's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, are you open to sharing a couple of things with us today? One, I would ask if you would share the story of maybe one of your most difficult transitions, and then one of your favorite transitions. And then
Mm.
I would love to hear a story about how you believe those transitions changed your children into leaders or adventurers themselves. So, would you be open to sharing those
Oh,
stories?
absolutely. I'm sitting here
Yeah.
thinking we my husband received military orders to go to Frankfurt, Germany in the late 80s, let's say 1988. At the time, we, the rest of the family, it was just myself and our son and one of our daughters. We did not receive orders to go overseas with him. So that happens in military life. And so we stayed in the state that we were in for a period of time, and then we transitioned to Philadelphia, which is where my family is from. So we ended up staying with my family in Philadelphia for several months until we received orders to join or accompany my husband overseas in Germany. That was that was difficult, but it was nice. I got to spend time with my family again, my core family again. The kids were younger; they got to get to know my family a little bit more in that season. But it was also during that period when we were ultimately in Germany that I became ill, and that transitioned into a period of having to come back early from Germany, getting to a qualified physician, and then ultimately being diagnosed with lupus. So the gap in between, like I said, when we moved, once we found a place of worship, once we found friends, it's a beautiful thing. It's just that transitioning, getting everyone settled. And so I would say that was a difficult move going overseas. All the other ones we pretty much were during stateside. Let me see. What was the second part of the question?
What
That
was
was a
your
difficult
what
one.
was your yeah, that one was difficult because it sounds like there were multiple challenges within essentially one stretched out move. But what was
Mhm.
your favorite move? What was the move that brought the family together or finally had the family feeling like, oh, this is the place we love? What was that move?
Yeah, that would be as my husband approached retirement. He's been retired about 21, 22 years, and we ultimately transitioned back to the metro Atlanta area. This was kind of a mixed thing. You know, after you're moving every 3 or 4 years, you just want community. You just want
Right.
to be in a place long enough to get to know people, to say, hey, I truly belong here, or we live here. That was when we transitioned back to the metro Atlanta area. And I think that was like early 2000s that we did that. What was interesting at that time is, if you recall the Iraq War, Gulf War, all those things, the Iraq War really spun up around 2003. So while we had transitioned, we were about to transition back, my husband received orders to go to Iraq. And so
Oh,
we had a situation where, and this is leading up to us eventually transition to Metro Atlanta area. And so we had a situation where I had to make a decision about accepting a job in this Metro Atlanta area while he was going to be deployed in Iraq. The beautiful thing about that, and I talk about in my book, when you think about generosity, and this is a mixed bag, Lisa. This is a mixed bag because I see the beauty in it and I see the challenge in it. But the beauty about that was the generosity of the people that I work with. Ultimately, we made a decision where I accepted the job. He went overseas, and my mom came to live with us. My
oh,
mom, she came to live with us. So she was able to care for the kids. I did the back and forth for a little while, but she came to live with us like full time. And I had a coworker, Lisa, within, I never get this time right because it happens so quickly. Let's just say 1 to 2 weeks of me getting that area, she actually offered for me to come live with her. And Lisa,
wow.
that's pretty uncommon because she didn't know me. She didn't know
Right.
me, but she saw a need. She saw where my family was. And it was just beautiful. And to this day, I just love her to pieces because of what she did. So that was
Thank
another
you.
challenge, but it also was the beginning of us settling and
Right.
having a place to call home, if you will, until he came back and when he fully retired. So, yeah, that
And
was it.
so, what in all of those experiences and challenges, I bet your children are super resilient. But what would you say is the best gift that was given to them? What is the thing that, like, where you could see that fear of new places and new friends transform into excitement of learning, of meeting new people and having new experiences?
Yeah. I would say my kids learned about friendships. They learn the importance of enduring friendships. So when we talk about moving, they can share with you now friends that we had at different locations, not so much the younger two, but the older two definitely, where they see the beauty of having those enduring friendships that I also talk about in my book. They also had the opportunity to see hospitality extended to us. When I say to you that sometimes we had to stay behind, stay with my family, other people while we waited to do the full transition with my husband. So they saw what hospitality looked like. They saw what kindness looked like. And so they today are those types of people that are kind and they welcome people and they travel. They don't have hesitations about traveling. So that fear, if you will, of going someplace different and learning about new people, I would say that it was just eye opening to them because they were exposed to those types of situations. The other thing I'll say is what really has impacted my kids, because I told you we have friends at different places. We've got friends today that we trusted with our kids. We had to. Family was not nearby, and these became essentially our families wherever we went, right? But we had
Right.
people we trusted, and so that when there were separations or I needed extra help because maybe my husband wasn't there, or whatever that looks like, I trusted people to leave my kids in the room with them, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
They poured into them, they were supportive, they helped us, and they really embraced us in those seasons of our life. So I see that in my kids now, where they see the value of those types of relationships and they're moving forward in those same directions. They know what friends look like, and they're very intentional in that way.
I hope this is inspiring and reassuring for people who are facing a move and are worried about how it's going to affect their children. I came from a family, my dad wasn't military, but he worked in such a capacity that we never lived anywhere for more than 26 months in a row.
Wow. Wow.
And so I learned, I think it removed a lot of fear. I can go into any room and talk to anybody in pretty much any generation because I just learned that skill because of moving around so much.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think it's a gift that we don't understand what kind of a gift it is until we get to experience it. And yes, I said get to experience it because I think it's just amazing when you start to be able to realize that, oh, it's that song from the 1980s, people are people.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever
Absolutely.
they be, people are people.
People
And
are
the
people.
human race we are just a bunch of humans with all of the same needs. We
Mm-hmm.
just have different thoughts about how to take care of those needs. So I think that's
Absolutely.
amazing. I'm happy for you and I'm
Absolutely.
happy for your children.
Yes, thank
Another
you.
thing that you had mentioned is that you were actually denied military service yourself because of some congenital issues. And then your husband was the one who served. What was it like sitting that close to the life you thought about having and having the door close on that particular path, but finding it in a different way?
Yeah, let me correct that. I did
Oh,
go into the military fully.
okay. Sorry.
I did receive a honorable discharge. The choice to leave the military was ours collectively. We began as what they call dual military spouses. We were
Okay.
both active duty. And then after having our second child, we made the collective decision that only one of us could handle it, being actually in the service. So it was
Right.
it was a necessity to make that transition, and it was good. It was good because again, I transitioned from there into the federal government, and that way, wherever we moved, there was usually a federal government or military organization as a civilian, federal government civilian, that I transitioned into. And so we're still being part of that whole community, if you will, military and federal government community. Didn't miss a beat there. Didn't
Gotcha.
miss a beat there. So the choice to leave was definitely a family decision, a necessity.
So
Yeah.
my apologies for getting that wrong. So
That's
what
okay.
was it like when you and your husband were weighing the process of one of you having to leave the military, right, to take care of the family, and then
Mhm.
ultimately it being you?
Yeah. It wasn't hard. It actually wasn't hard at all. He had a lot more time vested. When I met him, he had already had several years in the military. So I was the junior, if you will. And so it made sense that he stayed in. Also, Lisa, I was at the time, I think I may have shared, but at the time I was pursuing my undergraduate degree. We talk about 4 years, 4 year degrees, right? But I was actually pursuing my undergraduate degree, and I tell people all the time it took me 13 years, 13 whole years to get my 4 year degree. And so every time we moved, I had to find another school that accepted my credits, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a juggling act. But I had those dreams and those aspirations to finish my degree, that on top of caring for our kids, caring for our family, being that stability. And
Right.
that was a big part of it, that stability, because I couldn't fathom both of us live in the military life. We couldn't fathom both of us live in the military life. I also was in, I mentioned his deployments, but he was in what's called a logistics career field, and I was in an engineering career field. So with the logistics, he's subject to have to move a lot, right?
Right. Right.
Temporary duty for different things. So he had to move a lot. And it just made sense. It really wasn't
Yeah.
hard. It really wasn't hard.
I
And
bet
it's,
that experience, I bet other military wives were appreciative of having you in their lives because you
mhm,
had experience as from within the
mhm,
military and
mhm,
brought that to life on the exterior. So you had a dual-sided experience that not a lot of people get to have, which gives you particular insights that even military wives don't necessarily have.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, in our community, I'm involved with some veteran activities here in our county. I wear that dual hat of, military spouse, but like you said, firsthand military veteran. And so when I speak to people, I'm able to come from a place, like you said, of experience. I know it's hard being in the military. I know there's some challenges, and I love, Lisa. Now I'm seeing young people that decide, that make the decision going into the military. Just being able to have the conversations about how you transition through different stages in the military. First of all, is that discipline that has to be instilled, and then it's the training, and then you move on, right? But first and
Right.
foremost, getting that discipline is huge, and to this day that discipline still is a part of me. And it's very important for kids too, that I shouldn't say kids, but young folks, right? Sometimes college is the option, but other times it's not an option. It could
Right.
be technical school, and then there's the military. So when I speak to youth, I want to talk about the range of opportunities, because college is not for everyone. College can be cost prohibitive, but it also can be, I don't want to say waste of money, but if you don't know what you want to go to school for, and you just want to go just for the sake of going to school, that's kind of an opportunity cost. You've lost some opportunity there where you might have been able to pursue like military service or a technical degree or field. So I always tell people,
Sure.
don't follow what everybody else is doing. What's uniquely right for
Right.
you, and make sure that you stick with it. There, I know, are cases where people have pursued college, and only to find out later it wasn't for them, and they end up, having to start over again. So
Right. I would say this is funny. One of my friends says this all the time, but back in the 1900s, it was commonplace for people to take what we would call a gap year or
yes,
two.
yes.
I took several years of gap because
Hmm.
I was expected to go to college, so I did. But then I took an internship and found out that internship was a life calling for me.
Mm.
And being in college was not helping me be better at the profession I was choosing. Being in internship and being in training and being live and out there in the job was what was right for me. And then later on, and what I always said to people was, colleges have been around for thousands of years. There is no age limit on who can attend college. And, much to my parents' chagrin, I said the same thing to them. And I said, if I ever break both of my legs, I'll go back to college. And then lo and behold, I broke both of my legs and I went back to college. So it happened. Um, I kept my word, but it's, there's no reason to pressure yourself into knowing what it is you want to do with the rest of your life at the age of 18 or 19.
Right,
There's
right.
a lot out there, and especially now, our world is changing at a pace that has never been seen before. The
Mhm.
Industrial Revolution was considered to be a fast-paced change in the world. And we're eclipsing that with AI by thousands of times the
Yes.
pace. And so now is not the time to rush off into not knowing what you want to do with your life. Now is the time to explore and experience. I encourage people. I have nothing against education. I also took years like you did to finish my degree, but mostly because I took gaps in mine. Um,
Mhm.
but I would encourage you to go out and get education in every way that you can get education. Don't think that you just have to get it at a college from a textbook from a professor. Go get experience so that you can find out what it is you want to do with your life.
Absolutely. And you touched on something that, I think about. John Maxwell, he talks about along the lines of never stop growing, right? And he says something in his book called, I think it's The Law of the Rubber Band. It says that growth stops when you lose the tension between where you are and where you could be. So if you think about a rubber band, in order to get its useful purpose accomplished, it's got to stretch. It's got to
Right.
stretch. You don't want to stretch it to the point where it breaks, right? But you want to have that stretch, that pull, that tension that is helping you grow more and more. So it's very important that we grow. And to your point, every time I move, Lisa, I learned something else. I mean, I
Right.
had numerous jobs, but from clerical to administrative to accounting tech to all the different types of positions I held, and executive positions, et cetera, I always learned something. So in our day-to-day lives, we have the opportunity, whatever we're doing, take something with you, learn something from the process. And guess what? You know this, we're going to fail.
Right.
Failure, we don't go out to fail, but failure helps us grow. Failure helps us to kind of reverse and reassess and look at things from a different angle and see how we might do things different. So failure is not anything that we should fear, right? It's not anything that we necessarily want, but it does help us grow. So yeah, I encourage youth, next gen, just wherever you at right now in your job, it may not be the ideal job or the job that you want to eventually have, but take the opportunity to learn something from it. No doubt there's someone there who could be an informal or a formal mentor to you. Find that person. And they might not even notice that you're watching them, but find that person that would be willing to pour into you to give you that encouragement and that mentoring that you need. But keep growing, and don't compare your growth to, I mean, that's another thing we can talk about. Don't compare your growth to someone else's growth.
Right.
You know?
There's nothing that's the same about the two of you. There's nothing that's the same about you and somebody else, even if you're twins. There's
Yes.
nothing that's the same there. You have taken different breaths of different pieces of air. You have
Yes.
drank different 12-ounce glasses of water. You haven't all shared the exact same molecules at the exact time. So there's nothing that is exactly the same about you and somebody else. So comparison, I always say comparison kills, but even more than that, I would call failure a misnomer. Failure is a word that somebody invented some time ago, and we've changed it into something that we allow ourselves to feel bad about. But the truth is, there's no such thing as failure as long as you don't quit and you're willing to learn. It's all learning exercises. Even if you quit, you learn something. You learn that you didn't want to do it anymore, right? So
Mhm.
it's really not a failure. It's something that changed your path, changed
Mhm.
the way you're handling things, changed the way you're looking at things, changed the way you want to do things. So in my world, there is no such thing as failure. We have challenges, we have things that did not work out the way we thought they were going to, but they're all opportunities to learn and be a little bit better next time.
And failures are indicators. The word indicator came to mind. They're indicators of how we need to adjust with the
Right.
next thing that we do. When we think about mechanical failures, that's a signal or warning from our cars or whatever that equipment is that's saying, hey, something needs some tweaking. You need some oil here, you need a wrench here, whatever that looks like. So those are the opportunities to be alerted by something that needs to change and then making and taking the appropriate steps to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think I have this correct. It was 1991, right, when you were diagnosed with lupus?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And it
Yes.
came completely out of left field, right? Like it
So
wasn't, you weren't expecting
I was
a,
not expecting it, and so I spent time in the military. So in military service, the the time the official time was like from 82 to 87. Around 87 ish or before 87, I started experiencing certain symptoms. And lupus is one of those conditions, it's an autoimmune disease, and it takes a while to diagnose what it is. So you might see symptoms. I had something called my fingers kept turning cold, out in the cold, my fingertips and my toes. I had arthritic type condition. This was at this young age, right?
mm-hmm,
And I remember at one point when I was still in the military, I developed a condition that affected my kidneys and I was dehydrated. So by the time 89, 90 came, we were overseas in Germany, those things began to flare up. They began to flare up more. And my medical team there, I was enrolled in something called the Exceptional Family Member Program for military. And my medical care team recommended that I get back to the States. And I ended up going to a large hospital back in the States. And even then, I wasn't diagnosed. I wasn't fully diagnosed until 91. And I remember, Lisa, when the doctor told me I had lupus, and I gave him those look like, what are you talking? I had no idea what lupus was. I had never heard of
Right.
it
It
before.
it wasn't well known back in the
It
early
wasn't.
90s and
It
then late
wasn't.
80s, even amongst the
Absolutely.
medical community, right?
And even today it's one of those sneaky type diseases, and it creeps up on you. And it used to be, I'm not sure what the Arthritis Foundation or Lupus Foundation would say today, or other doctors, but it used to be that there were a set of symptoms, like 7 symptoms, and you had to actually, like, 4 of them had to manifest before they would diagnose it as lupus. So that's the
Mm.
kind of a building over time until you hit that magic 4 or whatever that
Right.
number is. And
Right.
so between labs and other symptoms, so yeah, it took quite a while for it to be diagnosed. And unfortunately, as with other acute conditions, when it was diagnosed, it was at its peak. It was at its peak. So I had to get some immediate, quick attention to it to bring it back under control. And there's been spikes in between where I've had to have, some drastic things taken care of in order to get me back in remission, if you will. But
Mm.
it is a disease that it's out there, and it requires managing stress and other factors too, but definitely having a relationship with a medical care team that is keeping an eye on the different types of symptoms that you might be experiencing. That's very important.
Yeah, and speaking of control, I remember you said something to me in our prior meeting. You said, if it's within my control, I'm going to do it, but everything is not within my control. So, how did you find that line for yourself, and how did you determine you were going to push the things that are in your control so that you were exercising every inch of ability that you had?
You know, there are things that in general that are within and outside of our control. And I decided early on when it had to do with my diet, when it had to do with exercising, when it had to do with taking care of this body, which is a temple, is God's temple, that it was, if it's in my control, I'm going to do it. And so I knew there were things as far as, like, for stress. Stress is not good for people with lupus, right? When I think about the heat, we talked about the heat when we first got on the call,
Yeah.
but I call the sun kryptonite.
Yeah.
Because I literally can't stay out in the sun for long periods of time. The UV rays and even sometimes fluorescent lights have an impact too. But when you become aware of something, doing your best to avoid those, or at least mitigate exposure, is what I mean by those things within my control. I think about even in the more immediate time, and this is a bit personal, but my labs came back showing that I was pre-diabetic. My A1C was a little bit past that border, that borderline. And I remember saying to myself, oh no, I can't do that. I can't do that. And I'm thinking about already having to manage lupus. I'm doing really well with lupus. I just want to say that I'm doing really well with lupus. But I did not want another condition piled on top of that when I knew it had to do what Leslie was putting in her mouth. It had to do with how much sugar Leslie was
Right. Right.
consuming on a regular basis. And I knew it had to do with my activity level. So the success story is this happened fairly recent, towards the end of October of last year. And since then, I've lost 27 or 28 pounds.
Wow.
And my A1C levels are back to normal. My labs are
Oh
back
man.
to normal. And it's not, I'm not saying it's as simple as that. I'm not saying it's as easy as that. Once I knew what I had to do, I was determined to do what I had to, and it worked. And it worked. So we've got things throughout our lives that we can control and not control. I think
Right.
about relationships. We talked about that earlier. We have to be intentional about our relationships. Those people that we can let in, and those people I think of a term, and I'll use it in my book too, because someone else used it, day ones and 1 days, right? We have people that we meet and they may be just there for a season. It's just
Right.
that period of time where you need that relationships, right? Relationship. And then for whatever reason, it's time to move on. It's not like depart on bad terms, but we had
Right.
that sense, right? We had that
Right.
sense of who is going to stick and who's not, or who, they're saying the same things about us. This is not, I like you, but it's all right. And then you have
Right.
those 1 days, and those are the people I experienced in military life, where today, my kids still love them, we still love them. We could pick up the phone and catch up, even if it's 6, 7 months later. We pick up where we left off. So those are examples. Again, relationships are things that can be within our control. We just have to have that awareness of what's beneficial or not. Does that
Well,
make sense?
your piece of the relationship, right? You control
Yes,
your piece of the
your
relationship
piece of
and
it.
allow the other person in the relationship to control their piece, and don't
Yes.
be offended no matter what way they go with it, because
Yes.
that's their path, that's the path they've been given. But what would you say you had to let go of to find that line, to find that place where you were realizing that if it's within your control, you were going to control it to the best of your ability?
I think about just the whole military life, the whole military experience. Every 3 or 4 years, having to transition and look at things a different way, and getting with new employers, and just getting acclimated to new workplaces, and all those dynamics, right? I think I think about the stress of could have accumulated and just overwhelmed me. And I thank God every day that He moderated that for me, and I learned it, I think, subconsciously,
Mm-hmm.
because it was like a survival mode. I couldn't
Yeah.
react to everything. I couldn't fall apart with everything because we had kids. The kids were watching. The kids needed both of us. They needed our strength and our support as they transitioned from place to place, right?
Right.
And we had our adjustments to make too. So it was more of I don't want to say a defense mechanism, but it's just something that I learned over time that was necessary. But I'm also mindful that things I can't control. I'm mindful of those things I can control, and I ask for guidance so that I'm not stepping into something that is bigger than me. That's not in my lane. It's not
Right.
something I should be reacting to or responding to, and so I ask for that guidance or that wisdom just to step back and have that discernment. So
Well, that's amazing,
yeah.
because speaking of guidance, your book, Giving
Hmm.
Recklessly, is
Yes.
basically a compilation of your life, right? It's generosity you witnessed as a child. And I'd like
Yes.
to know more about that. But it's also about the generosity you saw throughout your life, correct? So
Yes.
let's go back to when you were a child, and you have expressed that you lived in a family that didn't have a whole lot, right?
Yes.
You weren't born into privilege, so to speak.
Right. So if you think being raised in the early 70s, that's my picture here, and living in a large city, the generosity of our neighborhood was really what took us through. From a material perspective, we didn't have a lot, like you said. We often wore hand-me-downs. My mom sewed our clothes and things like that. My dad was a shoe salesman, so my sister and I, we always had a good pair of shoes. I don't know how my brothers survived as far as the footwear goes, but we had the basics of material. Often my mom would have to ask the grocer at the corner store for food on credit. She would send us up there sometime to ask for food on credit. We had times where our utilities were cut off, where our waters were cut off, different things like that. But the common thread, Lisa, throughout it, were these friends that were on our street and next street over and the street above. It was just like a radius of friends. And when I tell you, Lisa, we played hard. We got out with the snow, and in the summer months, we were playing tag, running around the block. And so the generosity of friendships was just pervasive. I mean, it was just all around me. And I'm going to fast forward just a minute and come back. To this day, Lisa, there are about 7 or 8 of us from our neighborhood in Philadelphia. We're on a group chat together. We stay in touch. We stay in touch on a regular basis. We have an annual
Nice.
reunion back in Philadelphia, and looking forward to that in the fall too. But that's the type of things, and it's interesting because I didn't realize the importance of it at the time. I didn't
Yeah.
know that this was so important, that we care for each other, that we watched out for each other. The ladies, the older women who are probably the age I am right now, who told my
Right.
mom when I did something wrong, or when my siblings
Right.
I did something wrong, that was generosity. They were caring for us,
Absolutely.
when we needed
Absolutely.
this or that, whatever it was. So I
Yeah.
saw that, I experienced that generosity early on, and Lisa, it wasn't until years later, as I began to write this book and having lupus and everything, I realized, oh my goodness, so much generosity was poured into me, and that's what it was. That's what it was. So I began like journaling and writing down where I had seen generosity from way back as a child, and it led to me ultimately writing the book about generosity because I saw it in the various forms. Hmm.
And that is, it's amazing. I think it's something that's missing a lot right now is the generosity of looking out for, because people are in fear of getting in trouble or having anger directed at them. But that, what used to happen in neighborhoods, well, I grew up on a farm, but the farmer next door would tell my parents when I was doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing, right? I wasn't in a tight neighborhood, but I was in a farm, and I don't know, were they watching me with binoculars? Probably, because everybody was looking out for everybody. And now everybody's afraid of being tattletales or being told on.
Yeah.
And so we've started to segregate ourselves. The issue with that is that as humans, we're gregarious. We are herd animals. We desire community, even if we're introverts. A lot
Yeah.
of introverts experienced this during COVID. They found out that being forced into introversion, being forced into solitude, isn't really who they were. They just needed to understand how to manage their energy levels, and when enough was enough and too much was too much and not enough is not enough. But I have seen since then, we're starting to have a resurgence of people desiring community. I believe that your book is vital for people to start to read, because community starts with gratitude. Community
Yes.
starts with grace, and community starts with care. And I think what you've built there is so important. So I'd love you to speak on that a little bit more, and what you found as you're developing your new programs.
Mhm. Thank you, Lisa. I knew when I began writing this book, I knew I needed to share how generosity has impacted my life. And I say has because it's still impacting my life. I knew that many people need to be inspired and understand that there are generous people out there. Generosity is out there. We might have to look a little bit harder, but within ourselves too, we have the ability to be generous, even if it doesn't require money. Generosity is not always about money. It is about money, but it's not always about money. So in my book, it is a Christian faith-based book. I do start with the my belief in the beginning of generosity, and that is when God created the heavens and the earth. He sent His Son Jesus Christ. He sent the Holy Spirit to be with us. So that is my faith, my belief as a Christian. Ultimate act of giving. And then I'll talk about how generosity impacted me. We've already talked about that a little here, what I experienced growing up and then through military service. Then I moved into what I say are 7 specific gifts of giving that we can all give to other people or they can give to us. That doesn't mean this is an exhaustive list, but these are ways that we can explore right? Even though it may not seem clear at the time. So the first is random acts of kindness. That's those times when you just see people and just at the spur of the moment, you just, hey, I can do something. I don't have to think too hard about this. It's random. I'm going to do it. Okay. Hospitality. I explained that too about the coworker that allowed me to come live with her. And she didn't know me, Lisa, at all. That still blows my mind. She didn't know me at all. But we have opportunities, perhaps people who are unhoused, maybe family members. And again, we've got to be safe in things we do, but there may be a family member. There may be someone who, think about the foster care program, right? There are kids out there that need foster parents temporarily as they go through a difficult time. That's an example. Care, encouragement, mentoring. We talked about that as I think about how my kids transition, had different people in our lives. Even as I transitioned from different jobs to job, there were people that I was watching, Lisa. There were people that encouraged me, that mentored me, even when they didn't realize that I was watching them. So we've got that ability to do that. I encourage people in their workplaces, places of worship, at home, find ways to care, encourage, and mentor people. Lisa, there's something called candor. There's something called a gift of candor. I talk about in my book. Think about that person who has the ability to say things to us in a certain way, and it hits us right where and when we need it. Okay. There are people who have those gifts that can just do that. And I have a couple of those people in my life that I'll talk about in the book. But consider in our own lives how we might be able to speak to someone to encourage them or do whatever else in a certain way. And we're a trusted resource for that. And it could make a difference in the trajectory of their lives. Three more, the gift of belongingness. That's about maybe someone in your family considers himself an outsider. Maybe someone in your family was not known to the family and you become aware of where they are. So you take the opportunity to bring them into the fold, if you will, introduce them to everybody. Think, Lisa, think about in school, how the new student shows up. And then you've got this student who's been there for a long time and knows all the other kids, right? That's an opportunity, even at work, right? That's an opportunity to introduce the new kid on the block, the new employee to everybody else in the office or in school, right? And you've pulled them in, right? You've given them the gift of belongingness. Last two are the gifts of time. I think that's self-explanatory. When we're intentional about giving people our time, they may need to talk, they may need to release, they need to just have somebody to listen to them, right? And finally, the gift of enduring friendships, which I tell you I've experienced all through our military service, just people that were those day ones. They
Yeah.
were day ones, not one days. And those relationships endure to this day. And as I wrap up kind of the summary of the book, I do talk about, Lisa, how sometimes it's beneficial to say no. We can't always say yes. And those instances occur when we are not giving ourselves enough rest, when we're jumping in and doing this and doing that and everything, and our body can't catch up. Think about on the airplane how the pilot, I think everybody knows what the pilot says, or the flight attendants say, put on your mask first, right? Put on your mask
Right.
first. Because if you lose the ability to breathe, you can't help anybody else that's nearby. Okay.
Right.
So, yeah, we've got
I
to,
even I even tell people to not just think about it that way because there are people who have such a hard time with taking care of themselves. And so sometimes the reframe into now you've become a problem for somebody else. Now
hmm,
you've created an extra emergency that didn't have to happen. And, sometimes it's our perspective that we have to shift. Sometimes we think, but they're more important than us. Well, if they are more important than you, then don't become the emergency that prevents them from getting care, right?
yeah, that and the whole enabling piece, and I have to say I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. Will continue to make mistakes. It's that mindfulness and that awareness of whether we're really truly helping someone or we're holding them back, or just whatever those dynamics are in between. So we have to be mindful of when it's been. I remember years ago when we were stationed in Minnesota at the time, and this older woman at our church, and I still laugh because the older woman was the age I am now. Back then, she was the older woman, right? But
Yeah,
she said to me, she said, Leslie, you have got to learn how to say no. And she
right,
saw that I was signing up for choir and this group and this group, and we still had the little kids and everything. And she pulled me aside. She said, Leslie, you got to learn to say no. And I think that's
right.
a lesson that we can all benefit from understanding. But don't overanalyze when it comes to giving, though. Don't
Right. Yeah.
overanalyze. Don't make it too hard.
Right. Absolutely. And, just make sure that you're leaving time for your own care in there. That's all.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
one of the things we talked about really early on, and before we wrap up, I want to touch on two more pieces. So, the
Mhm.
first one is you especially love to guide mothers. Tell
Mhm.
me a little bit about that.
Yes, it comes from a place of being there, been there, done that. I remember in military life feeling like a married single parent. I know that's an oxymoron, but just having the weight of all of that and still trying to keep a part of myself, still keep my dreams alive and just still have a part of me. And so as I think about moms today, and again, we've got to be mindful, there are moms that are military spouses and that are not military spouses. There are dads that are military spouses that are not military spouses. There are people out there right now that are struggling, really
Hmm.
struggling, and they need people who have walked that walk, who've experienced those types of things to come alongside them and encourage them. So that is one thing that just I get chills.
Yeah.
My heart beat a little bit faster because Lisa, I remember standing in the middle of a room crying. I remember just feeling like I wasn't getting enough of Leslie. I remember the career choices. And unfortunately, we have a society that tends to devalue when a mother or a family decides that the mother, mostly it's mothers, it's their dads too. I want to give them credit,
Right.
absolutely. Uh, Societally, they tend to devalue when mothers decide to stay home. When a family decides that the mom is going to stay home for a period of time as the kids grow up. And we've got to stop devaluing that because I think about wow, the opportunity for a mother or father to be that close to their children and be able to pour into them on a regular basis. Who else do you want raising your kids?
Right.
And from the
And
economic standpoint, again, I don't want to I want to make sure I'm not confusing. Stay true to your goals. There are things that you inevitably want to do. You can do them concurrently. The sky is still the limit. You still have to make those choices and don't allow society to devalue you if the choice is to stay at home with your children. So I
well,
want to
and
meet women like that and have those conversations.
I want to say too, and this isn't political, this isn't religious, it's nothing other than if we look at the evidence in front of us. The evidence is as women left the household and worked more, and children had less parenting at home for the majority of the day, things have not necessarily gotten better in what's going on with society. Things
Absolutely.
have not gotten better with morals and values. Things have not gotten better on a large scale with women or men, mothers or fathers, one parent being there, or some things that used to happen. My grandparents stepped in,
Hmm.
right? My grandparents stepped in and took over being there for us because both of my parents had to work because they were retired, so they didn't have to work, right? And having a family member or having a community like what you had in Philadelphia, you had other families looking out for you if your parents couldn't be there. And I think that that sense of community, that sense of family, that sense of children do need more than just supervision, right? They need caring, they need loving, and they need family ties and family connection so
Yes.
that they learn how to grow up with purpose and value. And, it's different from individual to individual. I'm not saying that there's a roadmap that works for everybody, but I'm saying we can look at history and we can look at patterns and we can see as a whole in mass what has worked and what has failed.
Yes.
And that brings us through to transformation and breakthroughs. You and I, Leslie, both have had multiple transformations, multiple breakthroughs in our lives, and you and I know it doesn't necessarily happen in just one thing, right? It's not one moment in time. For some people, it is. I have a friend who was in an abusive relationship, and she says it happened in a moment. But her breakthrough, her clarity happened in a moment. But all of the little bits leading up to it, all of those little 2-degree turns she kept making for her own good are what led to the ultimate breakthrough where she decided not one more day. But if you were to look back on your life, because the purpose of this podcast is an insight into your transformational breakthrough, what would you say were the 2 or 3 biggest breakthroughs that as you look back in your life, those pivotal moments where you finally decided this is where I make a right turn or this is where I make a left turn? What would you say those were?
Well, definitely the illness. I have been diagnosed with lupus. That was a lifestyle, life-changing experience. And it's again back to if I'm able to control the situation, then I'm going to do it. That is not negotiable to me, and we all have to find out what our negotiables are. My health is not a negotiable to the degree it's my control. I would also say that just just the dreams and aspirations and our desires, keep it moving. To me, it was about keeping it moving. To me, it was about, yeah, it took 13 years to get a 4-year degree, but I kept it moving because I wanted it. And what I didn't share with you is that to this point is that it took 11 years, 13 years, I'm sorry, to get that great degree. And when I ultimately got my master's degree, that was another 11 years. It was not like I did them consecutively. It was a break, but we've got people here that are getting their degrees at 80 and 90 years old. If you have a desire, if you have a plan or something you really want to do, keep it moving and don't let anyone else define what success should look like for you. I'm not you and you're not me. We never will be each other. Okay. So don't let imposter syndrome and those types of things affect you where you think that your dreams are meaningless or less than what others are. The other, I say the last thing, and again, it's been my relationship with God. I know this is not a platform, but my relationship with God has been it. And so that has, I have leaned on him all of my life. I've asked for guidance and direction, and he's come through. He's been faithful. And that faithfulness is extended to my relationships, to my marriage, to my kids, to my health. It transcends every aspect of my life. And so, whatever you believe, whatever your faith is, mine is Christianity, and I stick with it. I stick with it. I'm not perfect. I will never, ever declare that I'm perfect. I make mistakes every single day. But we've all, what's that saying? It says, if you don't believe in something, you'll fall for everything. I forgot who said that, Lisa. There's
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I've forgotten who said that as well. And I love that you are so open. We're not a religious platform here, and I want everybody to have the space to have their belief, right? Because the thing that carries you through, the thing that keeps you growing, the thing that keeps you believing in more, in not just possibility but probability, is the thing that's important. And if that's
yes,
God to you, if that's Christianity to you, if that's Buddha to you, it's all the path that gives you the guidance that makes you who you are. And if
yes,
you're not happy with who you are, then take a look at the path and see if there's a better path for you. That's all I can say. But your path is your path. Leslie's
yes,
path is Leslie's path. My husband's path is his path. And
yes.
so let's not worry about who's on what path.
Hmm.
Let's do the best we can on our path, and maybe we'll help somebody whose path isn't serving them.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Hmm.
So before we wrap up, what's the one thing you want people to know in their lives And then tell us a little bit about how we can get in touch with you, and if you are leaving us with anything that you want me to drop into the description in the podcast so people can click on your link and get to know you a little bit more.
Absolutely. I don't have one thing. There are many things, but I think about to thine own self be true. That's something else that we learn, to thine own self be true. We can't be another person. We are uniquely made, and we have to walk into our own, walk in our own realities, and not allow things to be. If you got your non-negotiables, stick with your non-negotiables. And above all, give. Find those opportunities to give. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but find those opportunities to give to others at higher levels, and just watch the difference that it makes, not only in that person, but in yourself. Because as we give, we are building our own selves up. And it's just a beautiful feeling. It's just a beautiful feeling to give to others. My book, Generous, Giving Recklessly, Testimonies and Examples to Inspire Higher Levels of Generosity, is available on Amazon.com, Walmart.com, as well as Barnes and Noble. I do also have a generosity workbook. You can go to generosityworkbook.com, and I'll send you this work back, and you'll have insights on some things that you could do every day to be generous to other people. I am also looking for more and more opportunities to get the word out about generosity. I love teaching and talking about leadership development. One part of leading ourselves well is how we give and serve to other people. So I see that in alignment. Um, Also, as far as I would ask that everyone just think about our military, think about our veterans at this point. They are serving our country, whatever your belief is, whatever your political affiliation is. The bottom line, we have people and families out there that are making sacrifices. And in any way that we can help them and support them, I would ask that too. I will give you my link tree, Lisa, to be able to drop into the show notes, and that will
Okay,
take up to everything about me, my website and everything. So I would like to leave with
excellent.
that.
Yep, and we'll drop the Amazon and Walmart.com and the way to get a hold of your workbook in there as well for
Yes.
everybody.
Yes.
So don't be shy. Reach out to Leslie. She's amazing. And this has been an incredible conversation, Leslie. Thank you so much for being here today. And I am so excited to call you friend now and get to see what we do in the future. It's just, the future is so bright. So
Yes.
everybody, be limitless, be bold, and be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.